Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And good morning to one and all. Good to be here with you today. I've had a caveat at the beginning of every show this week, and I will have so again. And that is the dog is here. There are two nice men directly below me dismantling my furnace, and hence just all of that information so that you will understand if there are sounds that normally one would not expect in a program such as this to be heard. So there's that. Okay. Other than that, here we are. Well, I have to tell you, I had the opportunity to be with a guy the other, I think it was last week, who I've been with before, but every time I have mentioned to certain people that I was in his company, they go nuts because they're like huge fans of his, and I am not. I mean, I understand his fame, but I was never a fan, and I feel bad that I end up being able to spend time with him when they would be so much more appreciative of the moment. But I bring him up because I just happened right before the show began to read the lead story in Sunday's New York Times book review section. He was on the cover. It was a book about him. He didn't write it, but it's a biography of him. I mean, there's been movies of him. I have mentioned him before, but I just happened to be with him last week. The reason being this book coming out, and he had been expected to do a number of appearances throughout the country to promote it, to help promote it, and he got cold feet and canceled almost all of them. But he had kept his commitment to his publisher to do something in New York City. And so he had come in, he lives in France, he had come in and done that. And then he had escaped to his friend's house in central Pennsylvania. And that friend happens to be a friend of mine as well, which is how I then know him. And the two of them are nutcases about 78 records, and they go off on these road trips looking for, gems to add to their huge collections. I haven't mentioned who I'm talking about, have I? The title of the book is simply Crumb, and the book is about a guy named R. Crumb, Robert Crumb, who is still and was a extraordinarily consequential. I don't know. Is you call it an artist? A comics? I don't even. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Whatever. R. Crumb. And the book's getting rave reviews. I've seen a few of them. Anyway, I was so when I've been with him, he's delightful. He's 80 years old now. He's been doing his comics since I don't know, the 60s. Hung out with Janis Joplin in San Francisco. did her, I think the cover of her first album, or maybe her second album, with, you know what? Here's where people who are real fans of his would want to strangle me. That why should I get to be with our Crumb when I don't know much about him? Um, but I recognize his work, and you would too. He changed the way comics have been done. There's no comic since he showed up that person who does. What do you call a person who draws comics? A comics drawer? What do you call them? Cartoonist. That's it, right? A cartoonist. So there's no cartoonist that doesn't know that Crumb changed the whole thing. Anyway, what was interesting is this time we got into the conversation turned a little bit to politics because I think I asked him if you haven't given up your American citizenry, have you? And no, he hasn't. And I said, so you vote? He says, yeah, I vote. Um, and that got us into politics, and that turned out to be unfortunate. I mean, not that he's, he he's so bright, but on the subject of politics, he seemed to me incoherent. And I had been warned by his friend that he is prone to engage in conspiracy theories and stuff like, uh-oh, Milton saying, did anyone else just start hearing me about a minute ago? What? Anyway, so here I am. And I don't know. And for the first time in a long time, I just held my tongue. Um, because it didn't seem to me to be any point in engaging him. I don't pretend to, as I said, he's a brilliant man, but with an odd view of American politics, if you ask me. Anyway, there's that. So I'm sorry about that. It's just this crazy self portrait of him popped up right before I started the show, and I began thinking about him. Um, I mean, his stuff. He was saying that. I mean, he can't believe what his stuff. He was scribbling a cartoon during lunch, and for my friend who had cooked the lunch, and um, and I took a picture of him doing it, our Crumb at work, and when he finished it, he handed it over and said, "Here, another masterpiece," he said, with, sarcastically. But um, the reality is his stuff sells for like up to millions of dollars. I mean, depending on what it is. And that little scribble he just did, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I don't know. It's weird what has value. I was watching Antiques Roadshow the other night, and things that I think are really valuable are often historical things. I think, man, that should be worth some money, and they'll say, on the market it would be about $600, and then some other piece of crap, as far as I'm concerned, oh, that's $20,000. Value is such an odd thing. I guess the market decides. Okay, so there's that. Oh, I also have to do this before I get into some heavier stuff. I came upon this. I think it was in this was in health section of the paper about how there are more and more places that deal with older people, nursing homes and such, have been training their staff to stop talking down to their patients. And I want to say that this is something that has driven me insane for my entire life. They actually have a name for it. They call it elder speak. And it's not just people in nursing home, it's anyone who is older is often addressed by younger people as they would address a child. I think people who are disabled in any way or are in a wheelchair, let's say, will tell you that they too are privy to this kind of address where they're spoken down to as if their age or their physical infirmity or whatever renders them somehow incapable of thought. And it's a thing that I think good people do. It's often good people who, like, have a lot of sympathy and or empathy, and that then creates this sort of different, your speech changes just a little like that, and then all of a sudden you're not talking like you would talk to another adult. And even as I've aged, I have been on the receiving end of it, often in doctors' offices, where some body who's dealing with me will call me sweetie. Okay, sweetie, that's it. Like if you're in the hospital, as I was. Um, yeah, you're spoken to like you're a, and I'm so glad to hear that there is some awareness now of this because it is offensive. I know it's unintentional, but Blue, excuse me, I'm trying to stop something. But um, or even things like using the plural. Um, are we ready for our medicine? You know, you don't say that to a grown up. You might say it to a child, but even if you say it to a child, it doesn't make any sense. Um, so even well intended, I'm just saying this as I found myself doing it the other day, and I thought, wow, is this something that just happens? Where I called a friend at the end of a phone call, I called her sweetie. I've never used that term for anybody, maybe a child. Okay, sweetie. And I hung up and I thought, where the hell did that come from? And that's something that old people also engage in. I don't know. I don't know if our speech changes as we, Blue, I've lost, uh, I've lost visual contact with the canine, and that could be a problem. Okay, here you go. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to say that, and whatever. There's a guy I bump into. He's at the state store, and again, he's well-meaning. Clerks do this, yeah. And he calls me young lady. Okay, young lady. Well, guys, I'm not a young lady. I don't present as a young lady. I'm a gray haired, older woman. Some would say I qualify as elderly. So to call me a guy, calling me a younger man, calling me young lady, is not respectful. it is demeaning. It is, and who used to do this, and it pissed me off. I called him on it, and he was oblivious. Doug Hirth, fellow talk show host, wondrous talk show host. But he would call women callers young lady, and they weren't young. And it is a diminishing of. Just saying, I wanted to get that off my chest. Thank you. I do it. You guys might do it. Let's try to stop doing it. Okay. So, I have a few little things that I wanted to share with you, an insight or two, a question or two. When I heard that Trump had fired the Librarian of Congress and then had installed one of his attorneys as the head, and then had said that they were taken over, essentially, the Library of Congress. I thought to myself, well, I mean, why? Some of all the things you're doing, you're going to take the Library of Congress. What purpose does that serve? I mean, first of all, it's the Library of Congress. It doesn't belong to the president. It's not even in that branch of government. Its very title tells you it ain't his. So taking it is an act of, taking it would seem to be illegal. It is a breaching of the separation of powers, but that doesn't stand in the way with this guy. So I was thinking, what? But why? I mean, what purpose? Well, I mean, the purpose is probably what it always is for him. He wants to control all of the means of government. Because once you do that, there ain't nothing stopping you. And I came upon this chilling quote, and it's from Project 2025, the blueprint that is largely being followed. And here I'm quoting from the blueprint. The federal government must decentralize and privatize as much as possible and leave the great majority of domestic activities to state, local, and private governance. And they go on then to say how you do this, how you essentially take down the apparatus of government. And one way you do that is through, here we go, an extraordinarily strong president who would refuse to accept the law that Congress had the final say in appropriations and programs and would impound congressionally appropriated funds, and goes on and on. So this is just another piece of taking what is Congress's purview, just taking it. I mean, it is an act of war in a way on a co-equal branch of our government. And he can get away with it because that branch is controlled by the party he controls. So they have been acquiescent and have allowed that co-equal branch, and we only got 3, to be essentially taken over. But there's more. And it takes us to DOGE and Musk. What? I mean, they said they were going after what? Waste, fraud, and abuse. Bullshit, right? We know that that's just what they said they were doing. What was he really doing? What was the purpose? And what we saw in agency after agency that they went into was that they wanted immediate access to all of the data that these agencies had on us, on American citizens. They wanted access to information about us. So, DOGE was not ever about waste, fraud, and abuse. And they've almost admitted as much since. But it was about collection of government data about us. They're gaslighting us all the time. And Barbara's reminding me of something here. That's true. When they took the Library of Congress, or attempted to, his god awful evil press secretary said they were doing it because the Library of Congress was promoting inappropriate books for children. Well, let's just say this. First of all, the Library of Congress is a research library that is for the members of Congress. When they're writing bills or giving a speech or whatever, they have access then to that library. It is not a library like you and I go to. It is not a lending library. It doesn't lend books to children. It's got no children's books, I would think. In fact, in order to even get in to do research at the Library of Congress, you have to be at least 16 years old to walk into the building. So the woman, the press secretary for this president, lies through her teeth all the time, but that may only make sense because so does he. So had nothing to do with inappropriate books for children, just as DOGE and Elon Musk had nothing to do with ferreting out waste and fraud. It had to do with the gathering of data on us. Okay, so back to the Library of Congress. Guess what else the Library of Congress does? It has a register of copyrights. And copyrighted material is something that Elon Musk wants to get his hands on for programming his AI. He's entering that fray, as you may know. I think his is called Grok or something. All of this that he was doing was mostly to get in his hands information that would enable him to get ahead of his competition. Do not ever fall for what they say they're doing, in as much as, Trump's trip it has nothing to do with the presidency. It has everything to do with lining his pockets. their intent is to take as much from the government that will benefit their private interests and also hobble the government itself. And they're doing it out in the open pretty much. I mean, they're gaslighting about what it is they are doing. But if you were confused about, so they go in with these, DOGE boys and they immediately go for the computers. They weren't looking for fraud. They're looking for information that they can turn to their benefit. Okay. Hey, Trump, by the way, he's so brilliant, honest to Pete. He said the other day that he'd invented a word. Did you hear that one? He did. He said, let's see, where was it? He said when he was talking about, you know, he will decree that drug prices go down. He said, and there's a new word I came up with, which I think is probably the best word. Well, we're going to equalize. That's what we're doing. We're equalizing. He thinks he invented that word. uh, would somebody tell this idiot? Equalize has been in the dictionary for like 500 years. I mean, what? You that this fool is somebody that our fellow citizens looked at and saw a man and saw a leader and saw somebody who was going to help them out. Whoa. Just effing whoa. Okay, so, J. Michael Luttig, don't know how to pronounce his name. He's that there's something so funny about the way he presents himself. He doesn't mean to. He's just a very serious, uh, slow spoken individual. This is a guy who you can tell who doesn't utter a word that he has not considered and then reconsidered and overturned in his head a few times. When he testified before the January 6th committee, I thought I was going to die waiting in between his words. It drove me insane. But he does it because he is an extremely serious man who values things, important things like law and the Constitution and words. Now, that I would now be looking to him and quoting him shows that we are not in ordinary times because he was known as like the exemplar of a conservative federal judge. He was a member in great standing, awed, revered of the Federalist Society, which is that club full of conservative lawyers from which Donald Trump plucked much of the Supreme Court. God almighty, guys. God, this is what it sounds when they take a furnace apart. So he has written a very long piece in the Atlantic, and I read it this morning, and I'm I'm only going to share a little bit of it with you because the fact that this man, this federalist, this conservative who has spent his whole life with cherishing American law and not necessarily um, seeing it like I would want it seen or interpreting it as I would want it interpreted. He values it. And this guy quite clearly thinks that our democracy has never been in such danger. He even says in this piece that if you look at, I think he called it the Bill of Particulars, that the revolutionaries in 1770, whatever it was, 6, or whenever they drew up their grievances against King George, that he says that Bill of Particulars drawn up at the inception of this country pales next to the Bill of Particulars that he then puts down against the man he says wants to be our king and is acting as if he were the king. He is saying, God help us, that Trump is already more of a threat to us as a people than King George was, who we took up arms against. I don't know if you've heard this, it was reported in Time magazine, but some reporter from Time was in the Oval Office with the current president, and he noticed John Adams' picture on the wall. And he said, you've put up all these new portraits. There's not an inch of space on the walls now at the Oval Office that doesn't have a gold frame picture. And one of them is John Adams. And so the reporter says to Trump, you know, John Adams said we are a government ruled by laws, not by men. Do you agree with that? And our current president replied, John Adams said that? Where's the painting? Oh, I laugh lest I cry. Okay, so John Adams is staring at him from his own wall, and he doesn't know which is John Adams, who is John Adams, or what the fuck John Adams ever said. But the reporter did, and John Adams said that we are a government ruled by laws, not by men, which all of the founding fathers would have agreed with, which all Americans should agree with because it's a true statement based on how the government is constructed. And Trump was just, what? And he went on to say, well, ask, we're a government ruled by laws? Not by men? These are direct quotes. Well, I think we're a government ruled by law, but you know, somebody has to administer it. So therefore, men, certainly men and women, play a role in it. So I wouldn't agree with that 100%. 100%. It's men. You got to have honest men like me. You can't make it up. And this is the same guy who, I think it was Christian Welker, who asked him, don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president? And he literally answered, I don't know. And when asked, don't you believe that all people in the United States are entitled to due process? And he again repeated, I don't know. Oh, shit. Now, guys, Luttig, Judge Luttig, quotes all of this in his article. And he flat out says, until Trump exits public life altogether, it cannot be said that America is a thriving democracy or that it is a government of law, not men. And then he goes on and on, showing how this president has subverted our Constitution and law every day, 10 times a day, and the Bill of Particulars, all of which constitute high crimes and misdemeanors, is just mind-blowing. And because the news today of the judge in Wisconsin being indicted by a federal grand jury, they're now going to go after her. She could well end up in jail. A judge. And Luttig is so freaked out by this. So he says, and this he wrote this before the indictment. He wrote this after she had been arrested. He said, the FBI arrested the Wisconsin state judge, Hannah Dugan, in her Milwaukee courthouse for supposedly obstructing or impeding the proceeding before a department or agency of the government and concealing an individual to prevent his arrest. And Luttig says the evidence, at least as revealed so far, does not come close to supporting the charges. And then he goes on to say the arrest and prosecution of judges on such specious charges is where rule by law ends and tyranny begins. Because the independent judiciary is the only constraint of law on a president. It is the last obstacle to a president with designs on tyrannical rule. But you know, it was the judiciary. I don't remember him going into this in this article. It is the judiciary at the highest level in a decision written by the highest judge, Chief Justice John Roberts, that gave this felon president almost total immunity while he holds the office. Now, you give a guy who's already been convicted of felonies total immunity while he serves as president of the United States, and you don't think he's going to go on a spree of crime that'll blow everything up? So when it's all written, John Roberts and that court will be highly responsible for whatever fate befalls this country. And Luttig says it is now entirely foreseeable that arrests of judges will occur in courts across the country. Because to read the criminal complaint and related FBI affidavit that led to her arrest is to understand at once that neither the state courts nor the federal courts could ever hope to administer justice if the spectacle that took place in her courthouse was to occur in state and federal courthouses across the country. It is impossible, he writes, to imagine that the federal government could ever prove the charges against her, but that was not the point of the FBI's arrest. The point was always, it is always the point, intimidation. And man, Luttig just goes on to say how January 6th was Trump, with the world witnessing, he attempted to thwart the peaceful transfer of power, permitting the gravest constitutional crime that a president could ever commit. And he ends thusly. After these first 3 tyrannical, lawless months of this presidency, surely Americans can understand now that Donald Trump is going to continue to decimate America for the next 3+ years. He will continue his assault on America, its democracy, and rule of law until the American people finally rise up and say no more. Now imagine this. This is this conservative justice, highly respected. And if I'm reading those words right, he is saying, rise up. I think he's calling for revolution. I think he thinks it's that dire. And as I read his thing, I was thinking, for so many Americans, they hear due process, rule of law, habeas corpus, hocus pocus, and I, they don't understand. And thus it was chilling when I read, I believe it was yesterday, the words of Justice David Souter, who just died. Justice Souter, who famously was put on the bench by George H.W. Bush with the assumption he would be a good conservative justice. And the longer he was on the court, as the court went further right, he went further left and ended up almost always voting with the more liberal members of the court. And he was famously sort of shy, lived with his mother, didn't want to, give speeches or anything. And in fact, couldn't stand being in Washington, D.C. And he self-deported at the age of 69. He left the bench. And I believe it was right after he left the bench that court made W. Bush the president in the Bush v. Gore 2008 decision. Was that right? Not 2008. I don't know. I can't remember dates or anything, but I think. Anyway, Souter, somebody pointed out, was subjecting himself to something he rarely did, but it was in his New Hampshire home, and it was a nice little event with questions and answers. And he had agreed to be interviewed by this woman who was a longtime friend of his, and he was unhappily going through it. And then some woman asked him a question which anyone would have thought was a just softball kind of question. And David Souter, this quiet little guy, all of a sudden got, well, for him, incredibly animated and incredibly passionate. What was the question? The question was, Justice Souter, what should schools be doing to produce civically engaged students? That set this most reluctant of judges off. And among the things he said was this: I'll start with the bottom line. I don't believe there is any problem of American politics and American public life which is more significant today than the pervasive civic ignorance of the Constitution of the United States and the structure of our government. So this is 2012. It hasn't gotten any better. He was saying he felt that if there is any problem we are seeing in politics in our country now, it is because the people don't understand our government. They're ignorant of it. They're ignorant of the Constitution. And as a result of the ignorance, they don't value it, which leads to, of course, where we are now. And he said this: an ignorant people can never remain a free people. Democracy cannot survive too much ignorance. And then he went on and on and on, and he said, after a crisis or something, one person will come forward and say, give me total power and I will solve this problem. Justice Souter said, and that's what terrified him, that Americans were ignorant of the law, the Constitution, and with that level of ignorance, democracy cannot survive. It will fall for a charlatan coming down an escalator. And in fact, all that was said 4 years before the charlatan came down the escalator and said, I alone can fix it. Right? So probably the fact that Justice Souter died, I can imagine he died unhappy, frightened for this country he cherished, having seen the very thing that he grew so passionate about at that little event in New Hampshire when a woman simply asked, what should schools be doing? And there it was. So, okay, I definitely had wanted to share that with you. Hey, something's happening with Gavin Newsom, the handsome governor of California, who once was married to that horror show Guilfoyle, who was engaged to Donald Trump Jr. Anyway, watch Newsom and keep your eye on him. And I'm just saying that's a warning because he is a nakedly ambitious man and he wants to be the president. And he is positioning, he clearly has figured out that the only way a governor of California can get to be the president of the United States is to begin to dismantle much of the progressive stuff that California is known for. So he's coming out with statements that are pretty cruel. He's I haven't been following it much, but man, he's going after the homeless. Wants all homeless camps, cleaned up, bulldozed. I don't hear him talking about what you do with these human beings who are without shelter. He's now going after certain programs for immigrants. I just watch him. I have a not so good feeling about him. Okay. Also, another guy I never had a good feeling about and still don't, and now is back in the news, unhappily for him, is our Senator John Fetterman. And since he's been back in the news, I don't know about you, but I've been getting texts from him. They always say, "Hey, Lynn, it's John. We're so palsy-walsy." And I'll read you this recent little note I got from John. He said, "I need to ask, is there anything I can say to convince you to toss in a few bucks and help us reach our $20,000 mid-month goal by Thursday?" And I was thinking, no. And he went on to say, "Well, what if I told you Republicans are out here trying to cut Social Security just to hand more tax breaks to their rich buddies? And what if I told you the GOP would rather make it harder for seniors to afford their meds than make things cheaper for you and your family? Or what if I told you that everything we raise from folks like you will help us keep fighting for a government that actually gives a shit about working families?" And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, hey, John, it's Lynn. What if I told you that government that you're decrying, that GOP you're decrying, is one that you have helped more than once? You've helped install some of their repulsive cabinet members and agency heads. You've gone down to the president's palatial estate to meet him. No other Democrat has done that. And he finishes by saying, look, if you can afford to pitch in $5, it'd mean a lot. But if you can't give, that's okay too. I'll have your back in the Senate either way. To which I would say, hey, John, I understand you have the lowest voting record of all 100 senators. How can you have my back when you aren't even there? I know part of the problem is they passed a rule that you have to put on a pair of pants to get onto the floor. But, I'm figuring if you have my back, the least you could do is maybe put on a pair of pants and vote every once in a while, which, as far as I know, is sort of a big part of the job. Just saying. Okay. And with the moments we have left, just want to talk about Pete Rose. He's cleared up for possible induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame. The commissioner, unlike the last three, said, well, enough's enough, and they're, I guess, lifting him from the ineligible forever list he was on, and and a bunch of other guys too. The only other one I'm aware of is Shoeless Joe Jackson, who also was charged with having, bet or tried to throw a game or whatever the hell. Anyway, I just want to say it's a good time for Pete Rose, even if he's dead, because Donald Trump's in the White House, and we got a president who just loves nobody more than lawbreakers. And in fact, the baseball commissioner was at the White House in March. Uh-huh. Maybe you didn't know that. Oh no, April. Excuse me. He was there just last month. And so this is all, I think, just another instance of somebody caving to the president. And Trump, in fact, had been putting a lot of pressure in his little posts on Truth Social, including this. The Hall of Fame, Major League Baseball doesn't have the courage or decency to allow Pete in. And then he went on to say that over the next few weeks, I will be signing a complete pardon of Pete Rose. Now, I don't know if he did that. And some people said, what's he pardoning him for? He can't pardon he has nothing to do with that. Rose did go to prison, but it had nothing to do with baseball. He served 5 months he had pled guilty to tax evasion. But Trump can, whatever. I guess he's going to pardon him for that because Trump commits that crime every other minute. Yeah. So there's that. Like, I care. The fact is these sports have, gone full throttle into. Has baseball embraced betting like football has, Major League Football? I don't know. Disgusting. I'm reminded of that, the fact that it was the commissioner, Bart Giamatti, who had been, I think, the president of Yale, who is the one who had banned Pete Rose while he was commissioner. And he's the father of the actor Giamatti. And he, what I hadn't known or hadn't remembered is that after Commissioner Giamatti put Pete Rose on, I guess it was called the permanently ineligible list. It's like being banished for life. He had told Rose, look, there's a possibility for your reinstatement if you just turn your life around a bit and be more contrite. He had given him that possibility. And this apparently had torn Giamatti up. This whole thing had just distressed him. And he dropped dead of a heart attack 8 days after the decision. It killed him, or helped kill him. I'm sure Pete Rose, being the fine individual that he was, greeted his demise with joy. Yeah. Okay, that's it for me, guys. Sorry about the noise, in as much as it occurred, and thanks for being with me. And I'll be back tomorrow because I don't know, I have nothing else to do.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.